So welcome everyone to our latest network gathering. I'm Kate from Pushing Up the Daisies. We originally started for care of someone's body after they've died and to give out information and hold workshops about that. But now we cover a wider area and really all rights and options when someone dies, and also how we can look after ourselves and each other. So we believe that the days when someone dies are so important and they're so precious, and there's only one chance of having them. And we think this is so important, we've called them the Daisy Days. So that's the days between someone's last breath and their funeral. And at a time when rituals and the natural world can be a great source of comfort, support for us all. So we are delighted to welcome Kaz and Fi tonight to be with us. They are the Seed SistAs, and they're very experienced herbalists, they're authors, they're eco-activists. They've published 2 books, they speak at conferences, they run online programs, and they also have a community interest company who focus on planting and supporting community herb gardens. And I know they give out grants to support that, and also to support people to look after their green spaces. So they long to share the meaning and wonder of plants, and so we are so lucky tonight that they are here to explore with us what we can gather from our gardens, hunt from the hedgerows, forage from the forest floor, and to nurture us in the days after someone close to us takes their last breath. So thank you so much, Kaz and Fi, for being here. So I'm going to hand over to you now, and then we'll come back for questions after.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. And we just want to begin by, we're going to light a candle and invite you all to just take a breath, really deepen your breath, fill your lungs, maybe take a sigh, and just let yourself arrive in this space, in this moment. And this fire, this flame, symbolizing the warmth and the light that surrounds us, is to open. We're very grateful to be invited to Pushing Up the Daisies. When we heard that this charity existed, Pushing Up the Daisies, we felt a lot of warmth in our heart, because daisy in particular is a beautiful, abundantly growing common weed that has so much joy to bring, specifically for this period after someone dies, when we get to begin and explore grief. And the daisy can help to reconnect us back to childhood innocent moments and joy and playfulness, which are such important emotions to let flow through us within the grieving process.
We have done different work around death, and often working with people towards the end of life, and then this period for the loved ones afterwards as well. And this important work of helping to support and empower people at a time when, in more recent years, the power's often been handed over, really ties in with the work that we do with all health, helping to support and empower people to take responsibility and realize that we do have the power to care for ourselves and those around us when we're not feeling great, or when there's shock or trauma that's happened in our lives. And we often talk about ill health or dis-ease arising from periods of prolonged stress, from trauma or shock. And depending on how death has occurred, any one of those things could have happened on the lead up to a loved one or someone close, or anyone that's near to you dying. So being able to work with herbs, especially at that time, to reconnect you in with your feelings, with your physicality, with your body, can really prevent the nervous system and the stress from impacting further down the line.
And that's something that when we talk about individual herbs that we are working with throughout this period, they are balanced in mixes because, as I mentioned, Daisy has this ability to gift us resilience. We often talk about when you walk across a lawn and you stand on a daisy and walk on, that daisy slowly and gently bounces back up. When a lawnmower cuts a lawn, the daisies hide and protect themselves from the blades. They have this innate ability to survive and to thrive. And you can see this. This is what we talk about. There's something called the doctrine of signatures, which is about how spirit or God has put messaging within the plants, how divinity speaks to us through nature. And we see all these different messages of the plants being able to reflect back into us and give us that strength and those medicinal qualities. But that quality in itself, when mixed with another quality of another plant that grows in that lawn. So we look to dandelion and the root of the dandelion, and the dandelions and daisies grow very close to one another, often sharing this mycelial web. So the mushrooms, the underground mycelium, which connects all of the plants and all of the trees and acts as maybe a communication network. That's the latest research with the Wood Wide Web, how these messagings can transmit under the ground. And the roots of the dandelion are tap roots. They go really, really deep down. And when you dig up a dandelion, as some of you might have been out there digging up the dandelions, trying to get them out of your lawn, or maybe even for your own medicine, if you leave just a tiny millimetre of a dandelion under the earth, that millimetre will proliferate and grow into a new plant, because that plant has so much tenacity and strength within it. But we see this root as deeply grounding and earthing, giving us stability.
So when we talk about these more emotional or energetic qualities of the plants, you might be thinking, well, how does that work? Or how can we know that that's what's happening? And what we see time and time again is that the way the plants interact with the body on a physical level give us almost like a map as to how they're working in a more energetic or emotional way. And the daisies, with this sense of resilience and bouncing back and playfulness, link into this idea of emotional bruising and being able to not necessarily bounce back as in forget or leave behind what's happened, but to be able to find that resilience of character, to find the playfulness in the sorrow, to find the joy in the grief. And when we work with Daisy externally, so if we make a balm out of Daisy, an infused oil, you'll find that in Daisy there are lots of these compounds called the saponins. And saponins are like soapy compounds. They froth up when you rub them, or when you make a daisy tea and pour one cup into the other, a bit like you're making a Moroccan tea. You'll start to see this frothy head forming, almost like a glass of beer. And all of those saponins act in the body to help expel things, so excess mucus, to cleanse, to clear, as a lymphatic, to support the lymphatic system. But also externally, those saponins help to break down bruising in the skin, so broken capillaries that have pooled. So in a physical way, they're working a bit like people might reach for arnica. And the traditional name of daisy is actually bruisewort. And externally, we see this quality of the daisy helping to break down bruising. And we see that reflected in the way the daisy acts with this emotional resilience and bouncing back, this emotional bruising. And daisy was one of the very first herbs that me and Kaz worked with that taught us that the herbs can actually communicate with us in this way or speak to us in this way if we're just open to observing and listening. And actually, in working with the plants in that way, harvesting them, connecting with them, creating remedies from them, the process of working with the plants can actually be part of the healing in itself.
The same with the dandelion. So this grounding, tenacity, that force is seen when we take dandelion root internally. We taste something bitter and something sweet. And the bitter aspect is having a physiological impact, and lots of different processes kick into action with our digestive systems. As soon as we taste a bitter flavour, we start to secrete amylase. The spit starts to gather and we start to be able to break down the food that goes into our mouth. And that has a knock-on effect in all of the digestive enzymes and the bile creation and flow, and helps to shift things through us. So where there might have been any stagnation or holding on, things can flow in a much more gentle way. Dandelion has this really supportive action on our livers. Our livers are often called the seat of anger. And when we have conflicting emotions within us, heat often rises. And the time after a loved one passes can be everything. It can be so many different things depending on the situation. It's a time when families often butt heads, where there's different ideas about how the next steps are taken. It's a time that can see anger rising, and there's many different stages of grief. And dandelion root, coupled with that daisy, is part of a triplicate potion that we work with. And the third herb that we bring into that blend is the borage flower, the star flowers.
So the starflower oil is something that people often go to the health food shop and will say, what's a good supplement for my skin or to help nourish or make me feel better? And they'll often be sold starflower oil, which is full of these linoleic acids that precurse the omega oils, the omega 3s and 6s, which are so important for cell health in the whole body. But we really like to work with just the flowers, the borage flowers, and they are iridescent purple stars. And we see them as helping to support navigating through challenging times. And the physical action of the borage, the old adage goes, borage for courage. And in that adage, we see this idea of courage. Courage or coeur is often linked with the heart, the French word for the heart. But we know that a lot of the energy that we need to cope and survive during stressful times stems from the adrenal glands sitting on top of the kidneys. And borage helps the whole system to have less demand on the adrenal glands. So very much is a herb for these times of challenge when we know there's difficulties ahead and challenges that we're facing, but that those challenges aren't just going to go away. We need that nourishment and support. We need those purple iridescent stars to help guide the way through the challenges, through the difficulties.
This is a mix that we've made that contains the borage tincture, the dandelion root tincture, and a daisy syrup. And we mix those three plants together and take drops. But those 3 plants could also be mixed in a tea, could be made into an oil. One of the beauties of herbal medicine, we often say it's very similar to cooking. Sometimes we call what we do kitchen witching, because when you get familiar with the ingredients, you can begin to blend and play in many different ways. And the tincture and the syrup that we've mixed together, we like to take in drops, in drop doses. And sometimes you only need to take 1 drop in a bottle of water and have that, because the energetic imprint of those herbs vibrationally grows in water, and you get a very subtle but potent support.
So those drops are something that can be taken regularly throughout the day, or also just when those feelings of overwhelm, panic, or despair can come about, that you can have those by your side, those drops of courage to remind you that you have the capacity, the strength, and the calm to be able to deal with whatever's arising in that time, those daisy days. So those are herbs that are easy to find and harvest, and the autumn, late autumn, early winter time is a brilliant time for root harvesting, when all of the energy starts to go back down into the roots, when all of that reproductive journey is dying down for the year. So we really like to make our dandelion tinctures around that time, washing the roots, chopping them up, filling a jar and pouring something like vodka over the top of them, and just leaving that over a lunar cycle, 4 weeks, and shaking regularly. You get a lot of this milky latex from the dandelion roots, and that's perfectly normal. People often panic when they see that coming from the tinctures. And if you're in a situation where a loved one's been very ill, or there's been a run up to the time of death, then these are definitely things that you can start to think about preparing for, and are actually lovely tinctures and medicines to have in the store cupboard anyway. But as a combination, you can then put them together to really help to bring you through that time. The daisies are more of a springtime, an early springtime flower. We make the syrup up with them. We sometimes put vanilla in with it, and then you can either freeze or refrigerate those. And then the borage flowers come a bit later on in the early summer. They look so beautiful when you're making a tincture of those ones. And then making that combination together with equal parts and drawing a lovely pattern and maybe an affirmation onto the label about what you're doing with that herb. Is it for remembering, gratitude, for connection, for regeneration of yourself? Is it for courage and getting through?
And another important preparation that we work with is rose cream. Roses are incredible. Roses put love, care, and attention into our hearts. And a practice that we do is we put rose cream and rub rose cream into our heart spaces, and we repeat mantras or affirmations that are centered around listening to our hearts. We know that our hearts are organs of perception. Our hearts contain very similar tissue to our brains. There's a lot of neural tissue and communication with hormones that are much more thought of as neurochemicals. But all of this is very much more, we think with our hearts, and we like to do work and practices to bring us back into our hearts. And rose cream has the added beauty of smelling incredible and bringing scents into the room where your dead loved one is something very, very beautiful to do. I'm just remembering back to when we had our grandmother at home and visitors to the space who were coming to visit and say goodbye to her after she'd passed, one of the first things everybody said was, "It smells beautiful in here." And that was because there was so much rose. We had rose water that we were spraying into the space. We had bunches of lovely scented roses, and had been anointing her hands and feet and forehead with a very delicate Rosa Damascena cream. And the rose cream gives us, on a medicinal, on a physiological level, a sense of calm. Rose is a cooling herb that helps to relax and open our nerves. And it's us having a conversation with the rose as translator to our nervous system to say, I am safe, I'm held, Rose is here.
And rose also, as well as these soft, inviting petals, which can be from one layer of heart-shaped petals on the wild dog rose to a more complex array with the Damascena or the slightly more flouncy Gallica. Those roses have this sense of inviting you in, of relaxation, of nurture, but they also come from a plant that bears barbs. And those barbs are there to protect the rose. And what rose teaches us is that we can be open, but that we can also have boundaries. And those boundaries can be energetic as well as physical, but that you can support and protect your own energy. And Rose invites you to do that. So if you're not feeling able to communicate with a certain person or in a certain way, or however you're feeling, Rose helps to give you the support in order to say no when no is needed. And we really work with that energy of Rose, of keeping an open heart, but feeling that part of nurturing ourselves is creating those boundaries, which can be important in that time, in those daisy days.
And then we wanted to talk about rosemary. Rosemary is one of the most important herbs that we plant whenever we move house or are going to visit a friend who has maybe moved house. Will bring a sprig of rosemary to plant. Rosemary is super protective. Wherever we've been, we look and seek out the rosemary as well. But for these days, rosemary is sometimes spoken about as rosemary for remembrance. And on a physical level, again, rosemary is a circulatory stimulant, so helps to move our blood around our body, but with a specific affinity to the blood vessels in our head. So really bringing freshly oxygenated blood to our brains and helping with the memory process.
And whenever we work specifically and especially with the funeral process, so during the actual celebration, burial, cremation, whatever might be happening, we always bring a big bunch of rosemary that can be handed out to the people that are there. And time again, people say how valuable having that sprig of rosemary is. And not only are they feeling supported by the rosemary, which we'll talk about some of the reasons why in a moment, but in everybody feeling into the same scent, the same plant, we become connected by those subtle shifts in the nervous system that happen when we're all smelling the same smell and all connecting on that level. And the rosemary is so powerful with the scent, and it holds its scent. Rosemary is such a special plant to bring into that space. And then that scent is something that reminds people and brings people back to that moment in time, that celebration of life, that releasing and letting go.
And once again, rosemary is a herb, as I said, of protection. And when these are thin space times, when there is death, there is an opening, there's a doorway, a gate open for souls to travel through. And that thin space time holds a lot of energy. And for us staying behind, there's moments of fracture when all the emotions are felt. And the rosemary helps to bring us into a present moment, to help bring us back into our own bodies. And the protective elements of keeping us healthy as well, and clean of any kind of other infection. Because in moments where there is all of this shock and trauma, our immune system can be lowered, and we can go down with all kinds of different coughs and colds. It's very common around the time of a death for infection to pass as well, and the rosemary can help. All of those scents come from the plant's own aromatic oils, these volatile or essential oils that are made by rosemary to protect herself. She's created those compounds to keep pathogens at bay. So they're antiviral and antibacterial and antifungal. And by us having the rosemary around us, she affords the same protection.
So all of those herbs that are aromatic have these volatile oils contained within them. And whatever herb that maybe you felt connected to, or your loved one that's died felt connected to, can be brought into that space in remembrance of them. But rosemary is one that we work with almost universally at those end of life celebration times.
And she makes really beautiful wreaths. There's lots of folklore. We're particularly interested in a bunch of herbs that are part of the Solanaceae family, and we have had a focus on researching those plants historically. And one of those plants in particular led us down an interesting path around death, and that was the henbane, because there were stories that in Greek mythology, when people were passing over, they went with the boatman across the river Styx. And in order to cross, they had to wear a wreath of henbane around their neck, their heads. And the henbane and the rosemary make really beautiful wreaths. And there's something very special about creating a ritual for yourself with the herbs, where you're actually making and weaving plants together. And they can be any plants that you have a connection to. And one that's very easy to work with is the ivy. And the ivy and the rosemary have been woven together by us, working with others, to make little crowns and bracelets. And the act of keeping our hands busy in itself is something that brings us into our bodies, into the present moment as well.
So rosemary is actually what's referred to as a nervine stimulant. So rosemary is very uplifting and energizing, which, you know, is important to us in that wake time, that time when we're looking to push through, to celebrate, to mark the end of life. And often in those daisy days, there's a lot of activity that can be going on around decision making at the end of life. And often the funeral marks a transition for the people that are left behind as well, that the rosemary can really help to strengthen and mark. The herb that Kaz was talking about, the henbane, that's an image there drawn by Silver with a photograph of the henbane in Kaz's garden in Northaw, is from our poisons book, Poison Prescriptions. And the henbane was specifically associated with that moment, that time of passing over. And henbane wreaths were worn by the dying as they crossed the River Styx and were invited to cross over into the underworld, into the other side. And henbane, of all of the Solanaceae family, so of all of the herbs that are deemed the potential poisons or the witching herbs, the more magical herbs, of all of those herbs, henbane is ruled astrologically by Jupiter. And lots of those herbs you see are ruled by Saturn, which is the herb of endings, of edges, of discipline. But Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of change, of growth. And henbane has connections to this idea of joviality, of celebration, of really bringing in that sense of here to celebrate as your loved one passes over. So we very much work with the henbane specifically for bringing in that sense of the wake, the celebration.
And it was so affirming for us. We studied and researched and grew henbane for many years, but it wasn't until we nursed our grandmother to death and had her through her daisy days, but on the run up to her death, when the nurses were coming to her home where we had her, they brought hyoscine to inject her with to keep her lungs free from fluid, which is very commonly administered in the elderly in hospice care and to the dying in hospitals. And hyoscine is a compound that comes from the henbane. And it was so interesting to see that this herb is still worked with routinely throughout our hospitals, although the people administering the compound didn't always know or didn't know that the herb's still there. It's something it was very affirming and very beautiful.
And it was amazing to us as well, because henbane's one of the herbs that we work with in that end of life care to help energetically support releasing, restoring, tying up loose ends energetically. You know, if there's awareness of death coming when someone's still conscious, that henbane's a herb that we'd always worked with in that way. And then to find out that within still the pharmacological medicine, that the hyoscine was still being administered was really fascinating. And then that henbane in particular is the herb that we bring into those daisy days for the loved ones that are left behind. And we've even worked with henbane ointment on the dead for that passing over time, where it was specific and requested. The flying ointment, as it's known, the combination of some of those herbs into an unguent, into an ointment that has been used traditionally to relax muscular spasm, but also to alter states of consciousness and induce a sense of flight, is something that once the spirit has left, or once that actual moment of death has occurred, there is something that has been requested to be administered to help with that transition, with that passing over. So there's been a lot of things that have come together with the henbane and this very powerful mythology that's always been associated with that time of passing over with the henbane.
We're going to open up. I think Kate might have some questions for us now, and then let you ask us your questions. So I think Kate's going to come back on.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. That's really interesting. So I've got, for anyone, can they put the questions in the Q&A now? That would be fantastic. We've got a question here about rose from Elizabeth. She's saying, I'm always unsure if any rose petals can be used to make tea or only specific varieties. And the same for rose water.
This is a really good question and a pertinent question that comes up a lot. So roses are one of those plants that has been cultivated for centuries, millennia, possibly even. And in doing so, we get a lot of different varieties, some that are grown for their yellow flouncy flowers, some that are grown for their crazy powerful perfumed scent. The black roses at Kew Gardens. We get all these different varieties. And sometimes when herbs are cultivated for their appearance or for their scent, the medicinal compounds start to alter and change within them. So most rose petals won't cause any kind of toxicity or problems, but wouldn't have the same either scent that you want or that nervine, relaxant medicinal qualities. However, to create more flower essences, if it's a particular rose that you're connected to or that your loved one has been, or if it's something you want to bring in by drying the roses. And we didn't talk about alter spaces, but we find that that's a really important part of any transitional time in life, is creating a space where you can bring precious or special things to it that are relevant to your loved ones or whoever it is that you've lost. And if there's a special connection there with a rose, preserving those roses in some way by drying them or pressing them and bringing them to that space is one way that you can work with them.
But we work with Rosa canina, which is our native dog rose. And that's the rose that we work with for medicine when we take internal medicine, or Rosa damascena, the Damascus rose. And we're clinicians, so it's important for us to know the exact species of the medicine that we're working with. But that's for internal medicine. And then the cream we were talking about is Rosa damascena again. But that doesn't mean that bringing your roses from your garden into the home, or any roses in bunches, and to have the scent of the roses. It's just different for the internal medicine or what we rub on. And that's only what our experience is. There's many different herbalists all over the world that will be working with different species of rose that are their experience.
Thank you. Elizabeth's also asking, could you speak to the yewberry and associations or uses in relation to the last breath? Anything?
The yew, the yew is so we've got a very interesting relationship with yew. We were working on a market stall when we first qualified from university many, many moons ago, and next to the market was an ancient church and an old yew tree. And we sat under that yew around October time of year, and she was covered in those beautiful bright red berries. And we were eating the flesh, because the flesh of the yewberry is delicious, and getting rid of the little black pips inside the yewberry, because they contain quite toxic compounds. And we dreamt up a plan of making yewberry flapjacks and thought that was a wonderful idea for a business because the yew held a lot of messages of nourishment through death. We were there sat in this, I think there was 14th century graves within that particular graveyard, so very long history of people buried there and all of the rituals and ceremonies that went around, and the tree watching over and protecting that space as a sentinel to the gateway between the living and the dead. And there was something so sweet and nourishing and very resonant of a time out of time, that it made us feel that it was so important that everybody got to eat you and that you was put out there.
We decided it was a bit too risky of a business to actually carry on with, so we ditched that idea. But the you as well, in particular, to us feels like that real gateway herb. So it's a herb that we work with when either the loved one is and this is energetically, but when there's a resistance to crossing over and letting go, and the same at the other side for the people left at that time of letting go. And the yew has been associated with graveyards as this herb of protecting the dead, so making them feel that energy's there to enable a crossing over to happen, so that idea of the soul not becoming trapped. But if you spend any time around a yew tree, whatever yew tree that is, sitting amongst it or tasting the flesh and getting rid of the pips or what the stones or however it might be, that's the energy that you can call on with the yew. We don't feel, or we haven't felt, that we'd actually have to bring yew into the space necessarily, but that there's that much more energetic, powerful connection with the yew.
Thank you. Thank you. So for if anyone has more questions, please do put them either in the chat or in the Q&A. But so somebody's asked about the difference between using essential oils or herbs. Is there anything you can say to that? Or
Yeah, so essential oils. So we talked with the rosemary and also the scent of rose. So the rosemary contains these volatile or essential oils, as do all of the aromatics. And through a process of distillation, they are extracted and put into those little bottles that we know as aromatherapy oils. They are super potent, and just a drop of those oils is a huge amount of medicine, really, really strong and concentrated medicine. And that's what makes aromatherapy such a important study. And people study to be clinical aromatherapists for 3 years. It's a really amazing profession. And we are herbalists, so we're trained in working with the plant materials, not in the extraction and aromatherapy. That's a separate study. And we like working with essential oils, but we're very, very aware that at the moment there's a lot of multi-level marketing companies out there in the world that put all kinds of things out there that people are taking as aromatherapy oils internally, and it's something that we feel is unsafe. So working with plants that are growing in your garden that you can go and pick and make simple teas and infusions with, like picking a sprig of rosemary, boiling the kettle, pouring that over that rosemary, and then letting that infuse and drinking the tea, you're getting a much more connected personal relationship with the plants around you. We like to invite people to slow down and to observe what grows around them and really take the time to sit and be with the plants and see what messaging comes across. And that's something that you can do with living plants that grow around you, where you can actually see their structures and what grows around that plant and develop relationship with the plant in a way that you can't do when you buy plants off the shelf from a shop. So that's very much what we encourage with the education. And do you want to say anything about aromatherapy, Fee?
I think you covered what we,
Yeah.
how we were, the volatile oils are one set of compounds within the herbs that when you distill them out of the herb, you're really concentrating them. They're really, really powerful, and they make for amazing room sprays. We put a bit of oil in a bottle, maybe with a bit of vodka to help to disperse it, and put water on and use them as refreshing room sprays and things. But if you want to use a lot of essential oils and more long term, they can have really profound effects on your neurological system, on your hormonal system. So to use them sporadically, but we'd advise really getting more training and understanding in essential oils, especially if it's something you want to bring into this work more generally.
Thank you. Okay, Jude's asking, are there any particular herbs other than rose that are good with which to surround the person who has died during their daisy days? I guess it may be in their coffin or on their bed around them. Anything there?
It often depends on the time of year. I think the first the first thing is thinking about what's around and what they were connected to and what you might have a connection with them to.
So especially with that rose cream that we talked about as well, that's a really lovely thing to use on your loved one as they're dying. And then when you carry scents on from that period, it creates less of this kind of separation and keeps that thinly veiled time present. And if they feel like they're connected to a scent through their life as well, to really bring that in. So whether it's lavender flowers or rosemary, or a lot of the aromatics are very, very strongly scented. And often what we've done is lay the rosemary on a coffin as it's going down in, rather than actually in with them. But I think a lot of it is about feeling empowered to make those choices yourself and to allow a bit of your own intuitive process and also creativity with it. So thinking, what would you feel happy with? What were they into? What scents and flowers did they want? I mean, for me personally, I could imagine feeling a bit overpowered by some of the aromatics if they were actually in my coffin with me. I would probably want something a little bit more subtle, and certainly the scent of the rose cream or something that's got that real sense of relaxation. But a lot of herb strewing I've actually done on top of a coffin rather than inside.
That's interesting. Sorry.
I was just going to say calendula is really beautiful, the marigolds, and you can pick the heads of the calendula. We grow marigolds, and marigolds is called calendula because she flowers through the whole year, every month of the calendar. Of course, in the summer months, you get much more of her bright orange and yellow flowers, and that bright colour brings this uplifting sense. And it's beautiful to bring colour into death. It's depicted in such a grey and black and white kind of time, but to bring colour in, especially if your loved one loves colour and you like colour, we love colour, so bringing those colours in. And that's the same as almost any, at the very beginning when I talked about mixes and blending herbs together. It's the same when you create a bouquet of flowers as a florist. You think about the colours that complement each other. We do the same with herbal teas when we're mixing rose petals in with maybe some lime flowers, which are pale green. We'll put some calendula petals in because they're bright yellow. And those colours, when you see all those colours together, they bring a sense of healing in themselves and joy. And each one of those colours is, in fact, a different constituent, a different phytochemical compound, which will have a physiological effect in our body as well as medicine. But us visually seeing colour brings different changes within our ocular structures, within our neurology. So thinking about that when you're bringing flowers and herbs in. I read somewhere that I think ancient funeral practices I was reading about, and they had information about from 60,000 years ago where they found wild flowers in burial zones. And I think that's it. If you think about our ancestors, we would have been getting the plants that were around us at the time and creating beauty and healing with them. And what grows around you locally, where you sleep, where you can walk out from your house and take a circular walk, what grows around you will be the plants that you have the most intimate relationship with if you take the time and have the space to open up that relationship. And they're the ones to bring into all of the important rites and rituals that we pass through in life.
Thank you. That's a lovely message, Kaz. So we're just coming to 8 o'clock now. So before we finish, is there? I totally take your message about what we say, but you mentioned a few things there. I know you said drops of courage, and also the henbane. Is there somewhere that you can people can get that from if they don't have it in their local area?
So henbane is one of the herbs that is on something called the Schedule 20, which is a list of restricted herbs in terms of how you can apply them for medicine. So only medical herbalists or practitioners are meant to be able to provide henbane for medicine. However, henbane is a beautiful herb to grow. A little bit like people know to not go near foxgloves. For example, foxgloves isn't even on the Schedule 20, it's pharmacy only for making digoxin with. A little bit like people know to be conscientious or aware of foxgloves. The same applies to some of these Solanaceae, but you can actually grow henbane and it's absolutely beautiful with these mesmeric flowers that have these purple veins cupped in these creamy flower heads. And to grow it is extremely, to grow the henbane is extremely transformative and healing in itself. But we do have a lot more about henbane in our book. If people are interested, there's a lot about the history and folklore of henbane, belladonna, datura in there, and how we work with them medicinally, and also how we've worked with this idea of the flying ointment in the bit before pushing up the daisies, so in that walk towards death as well, because that is work we're particularly interested in.
So the rose cream as well, is that something that you make, or is that something people would need to make for themselves?
We do have rose cream that we have on our website. Yeah, any rose cream that people feel connected to or that they enjoy, but we can share a link for rose cream.
I've shared the link in the for your website and for also for Pushing Up the Daisies website in the chat for anybody that doesn't know about it. And there's the rose cream there. Thanks, Kaz. There's a lovely message from Beth saying that her garden is her happy place and now she'll appreciate it even more. So thank you. Thank you, Beth. So yeah, so I think now it's coming to time to say very much big thank you to Kaz and Fi for spending this hour with us. It's certainly given lots of things for us to think about, and lovely messages here for you. And also thank you to Mary, who's part of our network, who suggested that we contact Seed Sisters, and they said yes. It was easy, so that's super. So thank you. And for anyone that wants to keep in touch, I think, is it just contact you via your website, seedsistas.co.uk, and anyone that wants to keep in touch with Pushing Up the Daisies, you can join our network. There's a sign up on our website as well, and you don't get many newsletters, we promise, only if there's events or something coming up. And we
If
send
you
out
want,
information.
if you do want loads of newsletters, you can sign up for ours, because we bombard people with blogs and information and what's going on at the minute in the world, seasonal articles and things that we write. So anyone's welcome to look on the website and join up on our newsletters as well. And we have a blog on there that's got a search bar on it with loads of information. You can search whatever topic or plant it is you're looking for. And if there's something you're looking for that isn't on there, you can write to us and we can put it into our blog calendar. It might not be till next year we get to it, but we do try and provide what people want to know about on there as well.
Okay, thank you. We're very
Thank
grateful.
you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Everyone.